Or Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. Will the government tax realised gains on investment property? If not, why not?
Honourable Bill English, with the associated word capital gains.
The government already taxes capital gains on property speculation where property investment is for the purpose of trading. A member may not be aware of that. In addition to this, the government's 2010 tax changes on property disallowed deductions for building depreciation, and this raises around $700 million per year from property investors, a much larger number than any estimate we've seen for the foreseeable future for a further extension of the capital gains tax. Further extension of the current tax on capital gains is likely to have high compliance costs, and that's a conclusion that 3 tax inquiries and several governments have come to over the last 20 years. If it excludes the family home, it won't make much difference, won't raise much revenue, and becomes effectively a tax on successful businesses. And overseas jurisdictions, it has not improved housing affordability.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
Why does he think the profits on the sale of investment property are of such critical importance to the economy that they should not be taxed, but instead be cross-subsidised by every other tax-paying business and worker in New Zealand? No, they're not.
Honourable Bill
Mr.
English.
Speaker, I would point out 2 things, as I pointed out in the primary answer. First, where any property is bought for the purposes of selling, the gains on that are taxed at current income tax rates. So that is, it's called an income tax, but actually it's a capital gains tax on trading investment property. And the member may have seen recent publicity about the scope of Inland Revenue's activities in ensuring that everyone who does trade in property pays full income tax rates, not the half-baked rate that he proposes in his proposition of 15 cents in the dollar. They're actually taxed at 33 cents currently. And secondly, the changes made in the 2010 tax package do collect $700 million per year from property investors, a much larger number than any revenue that he has posited as a result of his partial extension of the current capital gains tax.
Supplementary question, Jami-Lee Ross.
In considering various tax options for New Zealand, what international evidence has the Minister seen on the effects of capital gains taxes on housing affordability?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I've seen reports from Australia reporting on the effects of a capital gains tax, a partial capital gains tax, limits on foreign investment, a so-called mansion tax and compulsory savings. If these policies are meant to improve housing affordability, then they haven't, because housing affordability is worse in Australia than in New Zealand. Just today there is a report being published showing that first home buyers now make up the smallest proportion of the housing market ever in Australia. So less of the housing market now consists of first home buyers than ever in Australia. So we would be a bit careful about following that policy prescription.
Supplementary question, the Honourable David Parker.
What proportion of investment property sales pay tax as traders, and is it closer to 0% than 100%?
Honourable
Mr
Bill
Speaker,
English.
I don't have that information to hand. But I can assure the member that the IRD is vigorously pursuing every investor who trades in property.
Supplementary question, Jami-Lee Ross.
What reports has the Minister received on the case for a new capital gains tax in New Zealand?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I've received the report of a speech to the Property Investors Association in July 2005. It noted that the government-appointed tax review in 2001 considered a new capital gains tax and concluded that the disadvantages of such a tax, as complexity and costs, outweigh the theoretical benefits, so it did not recommend such a tax. The speech also noted that the government of the day agreed with that conclusion, that the status quo was entirely adequate. The speech was delivered on behalf of the Finance Minister, Michael Cullen, by his associate, David Cunliffe.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question. Order. Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
Is it fair that every dollar earned by a salary or wage earner is taxed? Every dollar spent by working New Zealanders on consumption is taxed, yet wealthy people who sell off investment properties for millions of dollars ordinarily pay no tax on their capital gains?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, in the first place, the owners, investors in property, do pay tax on their capital gain if they're trading. That's pretty important. Secondly, they no longer have the benefit of depreciation deductions, which means they are paying $700 million a year more tax than they were. But the fundamental position hasn't changed. If you have a capital gains tax might have an effect if it's comprehensive. That is, covers all capital gains in the economy. But no one is proposing that, and I don't think there's anyone in the House here who believes that it's practical to implement such a tax in New Zealand.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
Given that the majority of the public agree that a capital gains tax excluding the family home would be more effective in taking the heat out of the property market than LVR restrictions, why is it that under this government we have loan-to-valuation restrictions which hurt young people and first home buyers in favour of property speculators?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the Labor Party was actually a couple of years ago saying that we were old-fashioned on monetary policy and not implementing macroprudential mechanisms like loan-to-value ratios. Of course, now that the Reserve Bank has done that, they're not so keen on it. Secondly,
Order.
A comprehensive capital gains tax might have a benefit, but no one's prepared to implement that, including the government. A partial capital gains tax has no real impact on housing affordability, including for first home buyers, and we only need to look to Australia to see that.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
Isn't the truth of the matter that Conservative governments like National try to hang on to tax advantages like the lack of a capital gains tax on investment properties because this is what is in the interest of their backers?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, if the member is wanting to make that assertion, then he should explain why David Cunliffe made a speech as representing the Minister of Finance, arguing against a partial capital gains tax. And when I've heard the member's explanation of that, then we can continue the debate.
Question number 5, Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister and asks, will he oppose Sri Lanka chairing the